Welcome to the Special Education Inner Circle podcast. I'm your host, Catherine Witcher, and we're going to talk today about special education negotiations gone wrong. Now, if you think that I'm going to gossip about all of the situations that I've been involved in the past where they've been quite intense, that's not what this episode is about. I'm talking about the bigger picture of special education negotiations and conversations that we're having as parents, teachers, admins, therapists on a regular basis. Something that I'm sure that you've experienced. That's what we're going to talk about. Things that you've experienced and how you can improve your special education experience when it comes to negotiations. Because here's what happens in special education majority of the time. We have teachers who are feeling like I have to choose between being snubbed at my school or getting fired for advocating or asking for more for my students, or I have to accept the status quo. Or we have parents who feel like I have to fight for my child. And I emphasize that word fight. I have to fight for my child, or I have to accept what is given. And those two options, that kind of fight or flight feeling that we get as parents, teachers, and our admins and therapists, they feel this way too. Those aren't the only two feelings that are options when it comes to improving special education. There is a third option, but this third option takes three core strategies that we talk about all the time inside of our Master IEP Coach mentorship. So, our Master IEP Coach mentorship is built for parents, teachers, admins, and therapists because this is not something that we should be separating and saying, okay, parents, you go learn this about advocacy and special education, and teachers and administration, you come learn this. Now, are there additional things that we want everybody to know? Absolutely. But there is a core conversation. There's core trainings that need to happen to get everybody on the same page. And then, of course, parents, you're going to do extra work, right, to really figure out your child and their needs. They are your focus. They are your heart. They are exactly, the person that you need to be focused on when you take the core information and then really level it up. And for our teachers and our admin, you need to know the core information. And then, of course, you have to really fine tune your craft for whatever role you're at the IEP table so you can do that role with excellence. But there's this core piece of special education that is broken, and it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to feel like fight or flight. It doesn't have to feel like I either advocate, and like I said, either you become that mom, and I get it. There's kind of a chuckle that happens when we say, "Oh, well, I'm that mom in special education. Everybody knows I'm that mom because, I'm going to go fight." But you know what? I want you to be the mom, like with confidence and with that knowledge, and that you know how to turn a no into a yes without having to go to this extreme fight mode. And I don't want you to feel like you have to shrink and just kind of go, well, they're the experts. I'll just accept this. No, there's this other strategy. And the same thing goes for teachers. There is a way, and I know this because I was a classroom teacher. So I know that it's absolutely possible to do what I'm going to share in these three strategies that we talk about in the Master IEP Coach mentorship all the time. And remember, you can go to masteriepcoach.com and you can see when the next mentorship is happening. So it's something where you can come in and get these strategies. And here's the strategy. It takes leadership, it takes new ideas, and it takes action plans. And when you put these three things together, and we start with leadership, and that's what we're going to chat a little bit about today, is leadership. Like, what does leadership look like for you at the IEP table? So when I'm looking at leadership, and again, I'm speaking to parents and teachers and admins and therapists. This is for everybody. Master IEP Coach is built for everybody to come together and get the strategies that are needed, again, to change your special education experience. So that means when we look at leadership, leadership is the why. Like, we need to look at why. Why are we going to be going through this process? Why are we going to, like, what's the desired outcome? What's the big picture? How do we get out of the fight or flight of our choices to do it this way or do it this way? How do we tap into this third way? And it takes a strong leadership mentality and leadership focus. And leaders are typically, like, if you look at like a business structure, if you look at a company, if you look at, leadership just in all different domains of our world, they're not in the trenches doing the day to day. And I know that you are, but I need you to think like a leader. For right now, I need you to think like a leader. I need you to raise out of the trenches and think of, like, okay, like, what's the why? Like, what's the desired outcome? And we have our why is our child that we're talking about, and we have the why of an IEP. So I talk all the time, right? The purpose of an IEP is not only to provide a free and appropriate public education that we often call FAPE for short, but it's also to meet a child's unique needs and to prepare a child for further education, employment, and independent living. That's our why. Why are we doing this? We're doing this to provide an appropriate education to meet a child's unique needs, to prepare them for the future. And why do we have this document? Because we're working with this specific child. So we're thinking about the whys. And when we get out of the day to day, what is going on and how is it happening? And, just really gearing up our emotions. That's what happens when we're looking in this, like, we're in the trenches. When we rise above and we're like, okay, here's our why as a person first, here's our child, and here's our why with the IEP. Okay, now we need to absolutely look at what are some new ideas, some new things, because what we're doing is not working, or it's not working at the level it should be, or it just feels like status quo, right? It feels like, well, we've always been doing this. So how do we get some new ideas? If this is our why, child plus IEP equals why here, what is this new ideas? And we talk about this again all the time. As a master IP coach, you are learning how to think outside of what has always been done. You're learning to see that it's not choice A or choice B when it comes to placement, that you can see that it's not choice A or choice B when it comes to picking an IEP goal. You can see it's not one or two choices. No, there are so many choices, but you have to get unstuck. You need to be around people who can help you see choice, C, D, E, F, G, right? On. You need to be around people who have this experience of going outside of choice A and choice B. And again, I'm going to encourage you, if you're like nodding your head, like, yes, please get me out of this. I feel like I have to fight, or I feel like I have to give in, or I feel like I have to either just do my job as a teacher, and I can't, always do what's best for my students. If you're feeling that pull, that's where you go to masteripcoach.com and you're like, okay, what's going on? Like, how do I get unstuck and start working on this leadership perspective? So I'll give you an example. Oh, first, let me move on to this. We have our leadership, we have our new ideas, and we have action plans. Okay. So action plans, important. So important. A lot of times we have plans that do not have any follow-up action put into them, right? Raise your hand, right? If you have ever felt like you've put together a beautiful plan, but it's not executed, it's because it was just a plan on paper of like, well, this should be done, but we didn't have an action plan to say, okay, exactly who is doing what and how are we going to check in on this? So those are our 3 steps. We have leadership, we have our new ideas, and we create action plans. I'm going to give you a very specific example on how this works. This is one that comes at me all the time. So it's, can my child have a one-on-one aide? Or it is a teacher saying, we need more one-on-one aides. And this term, one-on-one aide, so a one-on-one paraprofessional, we need this one-on-one paraprofessional. And that a lot of times is like an instant no at the district. Like, nope, we don't do that here, which well, we don't do that here is not something that is an appropriate response, because just because you haven't done something before doesn't mean that you're not going to do it now or in the future. So it's, we don't do that here is definitely a red flag for me of like, oh, we need to have a deeper conversation on why that's an instant no right there. But here with this one-on-one aid, a lot of times when somebody comes to me and they say, okay, like, I need this one-on-one aid. Like, can I get it? How do I work on it? Well, first of all, let me just clarify that when a parent comes to me, or even a teacher comes to me and they say, can I ask for this? Here's the deal. You're an adult. You can ask for anything you want to. Now, how do you ask for something to get a yes, that's a strategy. Okay, that's a strategy. So I say, okay, one-on-one aid. A lot of times we get a lot of pushback when it comes to this, or we spend months collecting behavior data to figure out, like, can we justify this? And it's this continued negotiation. In the meantime, the child's not supported, and it's really frustrating for everybody involved, especially the child. So when somebody comes to me and they want to have this conversation about a one-on-one aid, I say, why? I go to that leadership question of why? Why is it telling? Well, because, and then I want to hear very, very specific situations of what's happening. Majority of the time, and I'm not saying there's not exceptions, majority of the time, we can nail down a commonality between the different situations to say, okay, so what I'm hearing is that we need additional support during unstructured large group time, or we need additional support during the transitions. We need additional supports during, and we can really fine tune what we're looking for when it comes to support. So instead of using a generic term and saying we want a one-on-one aid, we're saying we need additional support in order to allow the child to access their education in the least restrictive environment. Oh, that sounds different, right? So, okay, so let's have this conversation of how then are we going to, what are the new ideas besides for just a one-on-one aid and kind of lumping this umbrella? Because, by the way, listing a one-on-one aid in an IEP is not like this magic fix. That's not how this works. We have to be very strategic no matter how it gets labeled in the IEP. But so I'm looking at, okay, why do we need this? We get the answers, we get the information, we get the data, we get all of the, just team talking about why and what areas would this be needed. And then we come up with some new ideas. How can this support be provided? Sometimes it's going to be a person. Sometimes we've actually found that we just need to alter the environment, which actually allows the child to be more independent without working side by side with an adult, because we've modified or accommodated them in different ways. So we have these new ideas, and then we come up with an action plan of how are we going to implement this additional support, and how are we going to track it to make sure that it's working, and then what is going to be our plan if it's not. I mean, there's an additional conversation that happens around this action plan. So it's not just, yeah, we'll try this, or, oh, let's just give this a shot. No, we're going to have a strategic action plan. If you notice, I did not say we're going to call an IEP meeting and go into all the, kind of deep strategies when it comes to how to use the law for advocating. Here's the thing. We can go there. I have that information. I've been doing this for a really, really long time. But if you want results fast and you want to start seeing some change really fast, this is where we start. Yes, there are things that will need to get done in the IEP. There are things that we have to look back into IDEA law and say, what is mandated by the law and how are we going to make this happen? We're going to use that for support to get to where we need to be. But we start with the child, and then we start with that purpose of the IEP. And then we dig deeper to come up with this leadership question, this leadership perspective, then to get those new ideas, which oftentimes requires you to get around new people. It requires you to get around people who have been doing things differently. And it requires you to get around people who have experience in, successes and failures in different ways. And then we put together these action plans. If you're like, yes, how do I get around these people? How do I get tuned into what is possible? How do I, get out of this choice A and choice B and start asking these whys? And it's not as easy as it sounds. You're like, okay, so why are we doing this? And then why this and why that? And you really start to think at a different level of what's important during a child's school day and what do we really need out of the school system, because what one family needs out of a school system is different than what another family needs out of the school system, because everybody's home life is different, their resources are different, disabilities are different, everything is different. So what we need is a desired outcome. Never assume. And so parents, don't assume that the team knows what you're looking for a desired outcome of your child's school day. And teachers, don't ever assume that the students in your classroom, that all their families want the same desired outcome. It is very, very different. I would love to see you over at masteriepcoach.com inside of our next mentorship to help you level up your leadership, your new ideas, and your action plans to change your special education experience so we can help every child become prepared for further education, employment, and independent living. I'll see you guys next time.